Okay, so today I'm going to show you guys how to convert the process of care into the bubble chart, whether it's a problem type of bubble chart or opportunity bubble chart, and also your model of good care. So I'm going to start from scratch because I'm sure many of you are confused how you're going to link your process of care with your bubble chart and your model of good care. Okay, so I'm going to use my example of my project, which is high antimicrobial injection preparation errors. That's the problem. So we can see here that from the process of care that there are four main steps or four main processes, critical processes that we are going to focus on in this study, which is first, supply of antimicrobial injections, second, response antimicrobial injections, then labeling, then storage. So these are four main processes. So the first thing we need to do, we need to copy these processes and paste it into our model of good care here. So paste one, then second process, response, third process, labeling, and fourth process is storage. So the model of good care, the process part need to be exactly the same as what you have on your process of care. Then next we go to the bubble chart. So if the bubble chart, like I mentioned in my talk, if you have four main processes, four critical processes, you need to have four primary bubbles that is linked to your four main processes. So how are you going to rephrase these processes into the bubble? So you see first, like pharmacy supply antimicrobial injections to pediatric ward. So if you're doing the problem, means that you can see here antimicrobial injection preparation errors. That's your problem. So if you're doing opportunity, the opportunity is reduce antimicrobial injection preparation errors. So I'm going to show both types of bubble chart on how you're going to do it. So your first process, supply of antimicrobial injections. So if there's a problem, then you should write it in a negative way, inappropriate supply of antimicrobial injections. That's a negative way. So if you want to write it in the opportunity in a positive way, then you need to write maybe correct supply of antimicrobial injections. You need to just choose one format based on whether you plan to present the title in negative or in a problem way or in opportunity way. So second one, okay, we look back to our process of care, response of antimicrobial injection. So here you put maybe wrong response process of antimicrobial injection. Then in the positive one, you can put maybe appropriate or correct process, or maybe complete process of response for antimicrobial injection. So we move on to our third process, which is labeling of response antimicrobial injection. So here, what's your problem? In a negative way, maybe incomplete labeling of antimicrobial injection. You need to follow exactly from your process of care, you just need to rephrase it. Okay, here the opposite of incomplete, complete labeling of antimicrobial injection. Okay, then the last step, storage of antimicrobial injection. So this one is probably you can put wrong method of storage for antimicrobial injection is your problem. Then if you choose a positive way, is correct storage method for antimicrobial injection post recons. Okay, so this is how you're going to rephrase it. Then you have your primary bubbles done already. So now you're going to go to your secondary bubble, which is your main causes. So if you are doing like a problem, then your main causes, then you're going to use the main causes. So how do you get these bubbles? You get through the brainstorming session with your group. Then you have a list here, like what are the main causes to the increase of antimicrobial injection preparation errors. So I have here my first cause is pharmacists' lack of knowledge. So I can put it here, pharmacists' lack of knowledge will cause inappropriate supply of antimicrobial injection, because pharmacists are the ones who supply. Lack of knowledge on stability. So here, in a positive way, good knowledge, just the opposite, good knowledge of pharmacists on, just maybe good knowledge of pharmacists on stability, something like that. Okay, then come the important part. You're going to write your criteria straight away, because your criteria have to be the same with your tertiary bubble. So if here you're talking about lack of knowledge, then here you have to have something that measures the knowledge. So here you can rephrase it into pharmacists supply the antimicrobial injection based on stability data. Okay, I'm going to make this thing bigger. Okay, so whatever you put in the criteria part, you have to be able to measure it. That's why you have the standard part here. So how are you going to measure the knowledge? So here you assume that 100% of the pharmacists in the ideal will have the good enough knowledge on stability data. That's why they all can supply antimicrobial injections based on stability data. So you have to, when you key in this thing, the criteria things, you have to think of how you want to measure this thing, because all these things eventually you're going to measure for pre-remedial and post-remedial. You're going to compare and you're going to find out which are the most serious contributing factors. So here in my study, I use a questionnaire to measure it. So this 100% doesn't mean that we want everyone to score 100% in your questionnaire. No, we have to set like, for example, passing marks for your questionnaire. Let's say you set 80 marks. So we want in ideal world 100% of the pharmacists achieve at least 80 marks in your questionnaire. So you have to specify this when you explain about your questionnaire. So we go to our second contributing factors here. During our brainstorming, we said that insufficient supply of antibiotics will cause increased errors. Okay, because if you supply insufficiently, then they might, for single use antibiotics, they might use it many times for sharing. So here you just put insufficient supply of antibiotics taken from here, from what you get from a brainstorming, then will cause inappropriate supply, then will cause this one. So you have to always read from outside to inside to make sure that it makes sense. So here easy, we just put the opposite, antibiotics supplied in sufficient quantity. So this is a positive thing because it's supplied in correct quantity. Then again, you do your second criteria. So if you see here, the first process have 2 bubbles. So in here, you need to have 2 criteria as well, and the criteria need to link with the bubble. You cannot simply create your own criteria here. So your criteria, again, 100% pharmacist supply sufficient stock to what. So again, you need to see, is this thing measurable or not? So you can actually use a checklist. So let's say pharmacist A supply the medication, so we can have actually a pharmacist B to do the counter check with the checklist. So after they supply the barcode, pharmacist B can do a checklist whether the medication is supplied sufficiently or not. If not, then you take that not sufficient. Then here your standard, your reading in pre-remedial is not 100% anymore. So this is how you measure your criteria. Then next we look at the second one. We go on to our third cause that we get from our brainstorming, staffness, lack of knowledge. So we put here, because staffness is the one who do the recons, so we put here staffness, lack of knowledge on stability. So here again, the opposite. If you plan to do opportunity, good knowledge of staffness on stability. Okay, then you go back to your criteria. So again, you see here, pharmacy supplied antimicrobial injection based on stability data. So here, staffness, prepare antimicrobial injection based on stability data. Again, this is something that you can measure because you're going to send someone to observe them to prepare whether they prepare correctly or not based on stability data. So in this case, we use observation to measure the, you need to measure every single criteria. So in here, you use the observation way, and then we use a checklist as well. Then next one, we go to the next cause, which is wrong recons solution volume, wrong recon solution and volume. So it will cause the wrong recons process. Okay, so here you change to wrong recons solution or volume. So here just simple. If you want to do the positive way, correct recons solution and volume, then it will lead to complete process of recons. So we always read from outside to inside. So here we go back to our second criteria, again linked to that bubble. So staffness mix the correct recons solution with correct volume, draw up and further dilute if needed. So you don't need to exactly use the words here and copy and paste here. You need to like rephrase it to what they exactly do in the words. So now we already have 2 processes done, so we are almost there. Then we see our next cause, no labeling, solution volume, opening date or time. So we just type here solution type, volume, open date, open time, not labeled. Then it will cause incomplete labeling and will cause antimicrobial injection preparation errors. So here you write all details including solution type, volume, time, open time and open date. Labeled. So will lead to complete labeling, will lead to reduced antimicrobial injection preparation errors. So we read in again. So here we only have 1 tertiary bubble. So in our criteria, we only have 1. So we just write down what we want to label here. Label the response solution type, volume, open date, and open time for next reference, because this thing might be reused again. And we come to our last process, which is storage. So again, we look at our last two courses. So first, storage not according to leaflet recommendation. So here, if you want to do the opportunity or antimicrobial, I'm just rephrasing everything here using different sentences. Stored according to leaflet recommendation. Okay, so your criteria. Okay, so again, I said that here everything must be able to measure. So here again, we will send someone to do an observational checklist to see whether the softness label the volume, and use the correct recon solution or use the correct volume. Then here we'll continue the observational checklist to see that whether the softness, we'll check on the bottles to see that whether they label the correct solution type, volume, open date, and open time. So all this we measure actually using the same checklist. Step 1, step 2, step 3, all using the same checklist. So you can use one checklist to measure many different criteria, not necessarily different checklists for different criteria. Okay. So our next criteria is store the antimicrobial projection according to leaflet recommendation. So here again we need to have two criteria because there's two bubbles. Okay, we go to our last cause, which is lack of product info on vial. Okay, sometimes when we buy a new product, sometimes the leaflet doesn't really mention the product info, how to dilute it, what is the stability. So here maybe the positive things is product info for each vial available for reference. So very easy to refer. You can refer, then you can store it correctly. So always read inside. And we have the last one, which is to check the product info on stability of each vial type. So then you see we have completed. So you see here the full slides. Process of care, 4 steps. Your cause effect analysis, 4 main bubbles. So if you do opportunity, also 4 main bubbles in a positive way. Then you see your model of good care, 4 main process. So everything is linked. Then you go to your bubble chart. Here you have 2 tertiary bubbles. Here also have 2 tertiary bubbles for your opportunity slide, and your criteria you have 2 as well, which is the same meaning as what you have in this bubble, just rephrase. So the same for all the 4 process. So I will do this whole thing in 20 minutes time. It's a very straightforward process. You just need to brainstorm, get all your courses, then fill them into your template that you already have. Then make sure that all the criteria are measurable. Then you can start to do your pre-remedials to get your pre-remedial results. Then from there you can see what is your major contributing factors. Then you can formulate your remedial measures to tackle these criteria that are not meeting the standard. So this is how you link the 3 processes: process of care, your bubble chart, and your model of good care. So that's all, and hope it's helpful for your in doing your presentation slides.